Alrighty, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to get our deployment set up working against a local virtual machine of Windows 7 that I have set up. Now at some point off video I will be making this deploy to one of 3DBuzz's servers so that as we're developing the project you guys would be able to log in and all that fun stuff. But I want to show you guys the installation process of getting everything ready to be deployed from pretty much a clean slate, and I'll show you guys how we do that. So before I start with working on the deploy script, because the deploy script is really not going to require any modification. Really, the modification that we're going to need here in our project is creating our other set parameters file, but I do want to go ahead and get the actual site set up on our VM. So I'm going to move the VM over here, and I'm going to get the site set up so that I can access the site from my host machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Internet IIS Manager. You can get to that by just typing in IIS Manager, assuming you have IIS installed, which I did go through already. Then I'm going to come down here to Sites, and I'm going to right-click Sites, and I'm going to say Add Website. And let's go ahead and say site name is going to be prod.mmo.3dbuzz.dev. Or, you know what, how about I use STA for this. So it's not going to be prod.mmo.3dbuzz. I'm just going to do MMO3dbuzz STA. STA is the TLD that I use for staging things. So do MMO3dbuzz STA. The physical path I'm going to give it is just going to be somewhere arbitrary on my hard drive. I'm going to go under C drive, my C drive. I'm going to make a new folder called Websites. Underneath Websites, I'm going to say mmo.3dbuzz.sta. Hit OK. The host name is going to be mmo3dbuzz.sta, and we're going to be binding on all unsigned IP addresses on port 80. So I'm going to hit OK. Now there's a couple things I want to make sure before we move on, before we move on. One of those things is we need to make sure that our application pool is on this correct setting. And if we come up here to application pools, you'll notice that mmo3dbuzz.sta is using the .NET Framework 2 on integrated mode. Now integrated mode is what we want, but we want to have it running on .NET 4. So let's come down here and let's select .NET Framework version 4.0.3.0.19. This .NET Framework version would work for .NET 4.1 and 4.5 and 4.5.1. However, I can't remember if I even installed .NET 4.5.1 on this machine. So if we run into an error, because I haven't installed it, at least you guys will be able to see what that error looks like. And then I'll go ahead and install it. I just can't remember if I have. But let's just go ahead and hit OK. Once we make sure that our .NET Framework version is set to 4, of course our managed pipeline must be integrated as well. So now that we have MMO3dbuzz.sta, let's go ahead and do a couple other things. I'm going to edit the host file on this local computer, and I'm going to edit the host file on my host computer so that I can, when accessing mmo.3dbuzz.sta, I will point to that folder or that proper website. So I'm going to hit start. I'm going to type in Notepad, right-click Notepad, select Run as Administrator. Now that I'm running Notepad as Administrator, I'm going to go File, Open, and then for the path, I'm going to say C Windows System 32 drivers etc, which is the location of our host file. And then I'm going to come down here to the filter and say All Files, and then I'm going to select Hosts and hit Open. Once I'm in Open, I'm going to say 127.0.0.1 and then type in mmo3dbuzz.sta. So while I'm kind of editing host files, let's go ahead and edit my host's host file. So I'm going to come down here to Notepad, right-click, Run as Administrator, and then I'm going to open up the host file on my host computer, and we see the host file on my host computer is this. Now what do we type in here? What do we want the mmo.3dbuzz.sta to resolve to when we are accessing it from my host? Well, the answer to that question is I need the IP address of my guest. And the IP address of my guest is going to be 192.168.2.138. So basically, you're gonna want to, oh, whoops, not 127. You're gonna want to type in the IP address of where this is going to be hosted at, which is 192.168.2.138. And then for the value, I'm going to put in mmo.3dbuzz.sta. Now, you wouldn't have to really do this process, of course, if you go out and create your own subdomain on a real TLD, which is what you would do in the case of actually deploying this to a real environment. And that already has been done for 3dbuzz. I already have a server, which is mostly already set up and configured for this, and has Photon installed, and that's the server I'm going to be using. But again, I want to show you guys the process of doing this on a clean environment, and this clean environment happens to be a virtual environment. Because it's virtual, I'm just going to be using fake domain names that only exist on these computers and not real domain names that I would configure from a domain registrar. So now that I have these two things set up, I'm going to close out of Notepad here and I'm going to close out here to ensure that they're saved. And I should be able to open up a browser on my guest machine and type in mmo.3dbuzz.sta. And that's not going to quite work, and it's not going to work because I need to type in actually http://mmo.3dbuzz.sta. The reason for that is to ensure that I'm actually doing I'm going to that site as opposed to, well, not going to that site, as opposed to searching Google for that site. Okay, so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and make sure that this is actually working. I'm pretty sure it is working because if I hit F12 and look at my network tab, I'm getting at 200 OK. But I want to make sure that the directory is set up properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up File Explorer, go to Computer, C, Websites, MMO3DBuzzSTA. I'm going to create a new folder, a new file, and I'm going to call this index. You note that I don't have file extensions turned on the VM yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Alt, go to Tools, go to Folder Options, View, and then I'm going to uncheck Hide Extensions for known file types. Hit OK. And now I can change the extension to index.html. And then I'm going to open it with Choose Default Program, Notepad, and then I'm just going to say, hey, close out of that, come back here, refresh, and I don't get that. I wonder if... Okay, so absolutely nothing is working. I do get a 404 in the case that I'm not accessing a file that exists. So I think what might be going on here is my bindings might not be correct. MMO3DBuzzSTA. MMO3DBuzzSTA. Compare this to localhost. Yeah, it's like it's serving out the default website for some reason. So let's look at my bindings on my default website. I'm just going to delete my default. I hate the default website. Yes, I'm going to completely remove it. Come back here, hit refresh, and we still see nothing. Come in here, view source, we see nothing. Let's go ahead and restart IIS. I'm going to click on my root up here, say restart on managed server, which will get that restarted for us. Come back here, refresh, still nothing. So I'm starting to think that it might be that there's something else listening in on port 80 that is intercepting this request. Because I know that there... Oh, wait a sec. Oh, there it is. I know that index.html is in there. I know that index.html is not empty, because if I open it up in Chrome, it comes up with hey. It's just that IIS seems to not be serving out this file for whatever reason. So let's go ahead and see what else is listening on port 80. So to do that, I'm going to come back here to my command window, and I'm going to type in netstat-a and b. And that requires elevation. So I'm going to close out of this, type in CMD in my start menu, right-click CMD, say run as admin, and then type in netstat a and b. And let's see if we have anything listening on port 80 that isn't what we want. So we see there is something on port 80 already. It's not giving me who owns that. That's kind of weird. Let's see here. lsas.exe. Who are you? Why are you listening on port 80? That's the Local Security Authority Subsystem Service. We have some 443s in my SVC host. We have an 80 right there. All right, so we got some 443s and some 80s already binding. Let me just go ahead and stop my web server entirely so that, there we go, so that doesn't show up, because I know that's going to be listening on port 80. Okay, so we still have this guy. So who is this guy? Well, let's do some fancy, let's do something a little bit fancier. I'm going to say netstat AON, which that's going to give me this list, which shows me my PID. And then I'm going to pipe that into find str colon 80. And I see I have two things, both 4. PID 4 should be the system. And I can verify that by looking at my processes, show all processes, blah, 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 property, come on. View, select columns, PID, and the PID of 4 is system. So something in the system level is listening to 80, which actually is kind of what I want here. That will happen. Now when I start it again, let's see who else is listening. Now we see that we do indeed have another guy listening on port 80. Well, that's the foreign address. I don't really care about the foreign address. I care about the local address. So now we have system again listening on 80. So this is, I don't know. Let's see here. Another possibility is that I might not have enabled static content handlers. So I'm going to go ahead and search for programs and features. I'm going to say turn Windows features on or off, which is going to allow me to add and remove components from IIS. Open up IIS. Let's open up this. Common HTTP features. Oh, wow. Yeah, I just wasn't serving out HTML and image files. Okay, let's make sure static content is enabled. Hit OK. This should only take a second, really. I really don't know. I don't know why Microsoft has this big thing for like itemizing little bits of a program so you can like turn on and off little features. It's like, really? You want your web server to like not be able to serve out HTML files? I mean, you could already, if you didn't want your server to serve out HTML files, you could use a bunch of different techniques to prevent it from doing that. But setting that as the default behavior seems kind of silly. We refresh and now we see hey. So that's what we want. Let's go ahead and do this for my host now. So I'm going to say http://mmo.3dbuzz.sta. And for my host, I do indeed get hey. So that's really cool. We now have a web server that is set up with the proper site, and we verified that the site is working. However, I will point out one thing. You do need to make sure that you have port 80 unblocked for incoming connections. So make sure to open up if you're not able to hit it from a remote site, but you're able to hit it from a local site, what you're going to want to do is make sure that you open up port 80 inbound in your firewall. But now that we have this all done, let's go through the other steps to get MSDeploy ready for this server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Chrome and I'm going to type in MSDeploy, hit enter. I'm going to go web deploy 3.5 is what we want. I'm going to say or view additional downloads. I'm going to install x86 because I'm on a 64-bit VM right now. Wait for it to kind of sit there at 0 seconds left while it's doing whatever. Run it. Hit next. I already have this installed, by the way. But make sure that when you install this on your remote computer that you do a custom install and ensure that all these things are checked. These things aren't so much important on if you're not installing it on a Windows server, but this thing is. This thing is where we're hitting when we do our deployments. So I'm just going to cancel out of that because, like I said, I already have this installed. I don't need it anymore or installed anymore. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to have to go through the steps that I outlined before. So we've installed WebDeploy. Let's ensure that our web deploy agent is running. So I'm going to open up services. I'm going to scroll down here at the bottom, and I'm going to make sure, what's it called? Web deployment agent service is running. Now I'm going to keep my services open because I'm going to be needing this in a moment to restart the service. All right, let's create our deploy user. So I'm going to go to start. I'm going to type in MMC. I'm going to say file, add, remove, snap-in. I'm going to select local users and groups on my local computer, hit OK. Come up here to users. Let's right click somewhere, hit new user, type in deploy. Password is going to be test and test. Uncheck user must change password, and check password never expires. Hit create, and now I have my deploy user. Now I'm going to want to add him to my MSDepsev users group. So I'm going to want to go into groups, right click, hit new group, and type in MSDep SVC users. As far as members, I want to hit add, and I want to add the deploy member to it. And then I want to hit create, and I've now created that group. Now that I've created that group, I want to make sure that I restart. Well, let's actually go ahead and fix our file permissions first, and then we'll restart our deployment agent service. So I'm going to come into File Explorer. I'm going to delete index.html because we don't need that anymore. I'm going to right-click on the folder that our website points to, the physical path, go to Security, hit Edit, hit Add, type in Deploy, select Full Control, and hit Apply, then hit OK, then hit OK. So Deploy now has write access to this folder, which is what we want. Now I'm going to go into Computer, Local Disk C, Windows, System32, iNet Serve, so Internet Server. And then on Config, before I change the security for it, I will have to double click on it and give myself access to this folder. So that's what I did by double clicking on it going into it. Now that I've given myself access to it, I'm going to right click, hit Properties, go to Security, and so you see Nelson is now added to it. But I want to add a new user called Network Service. Hit Allow on everything, hit OK, hit Continue, hit OK, and we're good. Okay, so that should be all the local configuration that we need. We installed our web deployment, we created our user with the proper group, and then we changed our permissions of our folders, and that's really about it. Now coming back into Visual Studio, we need to do one more thing. We need to create a new parameters file. So I'm just going to take this parameters file, I'm going to hit Control-C, then I'm going to hit Control-V, and then I'm going to rename it parameters.production.config. And then inside of parameters production.config, I'm going to change the IIS web application name from test MMO to whatever the name is in IIS that I had on my VM, which is MMO 3dbuzz. So coming back into Visual Studio, I'm going to type in mmo.3dbuzz.sta to get that working properly. And that really should be it. We should now be able to invoke our build script and have it send its contents to our virtual machine. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to open up a command line window. Then I'm going to cd into the folder that contains our build script. So I need to get that path first. And I'm going to take that path, I'm going to copy it off screen, paste it in here, switch over to the F drive. Actually, no, what am I doing? I wanted to open up my developer command prompt thing. So open up my developer command prompt, and then cd into that folder, switch over to the F drive. Then I'm going to say msbuild mmo or buzz mmo build.proj /t : deploy website, then space. Now I have to provide in a variety of additional filters. So first of all, I want to specify the web deploy computer property. So I'm going to say /p : web deploy computer. And then I'm going to say that equals Well, actually, I can make things easy. I don't even need to use my uh, I don't even need to use my IP address because I already have a domain name that'll resolve to my IP address that I want, which is mmo.3dbuzz.sta. So I can just use that address right here. So I can come up here and say web deploy computer equals mmo.3dbuzz.sta. Then I can say /p colon. Now I have to specify my username. So I'm going to say web deploy user equals deploy. Then I'm going to say /p colon web deploy password equals test. Then I'm going to say /p colon. Then I'm going to provide the set, or no, I don't need to provide the set params file. Because if you recall, our set params file already is set. See, here's the build script. Our set params file will already be set if we set our environment to production. It'll be set to our parameters production.config. So let's go ahead and set our environment to production. So I'll say /p colon env equals prod. And the moment of truth. I really was not expecting it to work on the first try. Wow. Well, typing in this single command does indeed get this to work. So yeah, that is pretty cool. We now have our application deployed to our server. Of course, we're getting an error because we haven't quite set this server up to handle what we have already. So for example, it's saying extension list URL integrated 4.0 has a bad managed pipeline handler in its thing. So let's look at the extension URL handler and see what that is. Extension list URL handler integrated 4.0. See, I'm not entirely sure which version of .NET this comes about, or which installer I might need. Now, it is possible actually to locally deploy ASP.NET MVC and Web API. I'm not going to worry about that here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install the latest version of ASP.NET MVC on the server globally, and then I'm going to install the latest version of .NET as well. So I'm going to do the version of .NET first. So I'm going to say .NET Framework 4.5.1, and we get a download 4.5.1 offline installer. Let's hit download. It's downloading. The Microsoft .NET Framework is a highly compatible in-place update to the Microsoft .NET 4 and 4.5. That sounds like fun. Oh great, one thing that I probably haven't pointed out is because I'm in a VM, my disk I/O performance is going to be miserable. But let's see if I can keep people entertained instead of stopping the video. I'm kind of running out of ideas. Actually, in the meantime, let me go ahead and find out where this extension list URL handler comes from. Does it come from the latest version of .NET, or does it come from ASP.NET MVC? I've actually always been curious about that. Well, it says ASP.NET v4 adds extension list handler mappings to its IIS configuration file. Okay, so I already do have .NET 4.5.1 installed. So there's that, I guess. So I can close out of this installation. Let's go ahead and let's check our programs and features first, because from what I'm reading, this is supposed to be a feature of IIS. I shouldn't really. While it's doing that, I'm going to check something as well. I'm going to check to see if we are doing a local copy of ASP.NET. And we are. We are bringing ASP.NET MVC into the project, right into the bin folder. So we shouldn't even need to install that server-wide. We shouldn't need to install that into the GAC. And if I can get away with not putting something into the GAC, I always do. Let's go ahead and look at this. Directory browsing, web dev publishing, don't care. ISAPI extensions and ISAPI filter server-side include. Okay, so it says that it's pretty much all there. So there must be some sort of problem here. As a bad module, managed pipeline handler. This is interesting. This actually might be a problem with let me see. Let me just read this error completely. Handler, extensionless URL handler integrated 4.0. So let's go ahead and look at where that gets added into our web.doc config. So I'm going to come in here to my web config, and I'm going to go ahead and locate where my handlers are. So we see we have that. It says it has a bad module managed pipeline handler in its module list. So managed pipeline handler. You know, I don't see managed pipeline handler anywhere in here. So I'm starting to wonder if this is a bug or something that isn't installed. Okay, so it seems that ASP.NET was maybe not installed properly. There's a tool where I can re-register ASP.NET with IIS, and I think I'm going to go ahead and try to do that here. So I'm going to type in CMD, go here, say run as administrator. Then I'm going to type in C Windows Microsoft.NET Framework version 4 ASP.NET reg iis.exe -i. And so what I'm basically doing is I'm reintegrating ASP.NET into IIS. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to restart IIS for good measure. Come back here, hit refresh, and see what I get. We wait a year and a half for it to spool up. Not entirely sure what exactly it's doing at this point, but it probably has something to do with my ridiculously bad disk I/O. Okay, cannot load V8 interface assembly. Verify the following files are installed with your application. So here's a problem that we might run into on occasion, and it seems that the issue is that our V8 stuff is not being included in our web package. So when that happens, I'll show you guys how to fix it. But before I do that, I want to verify. See, right here, we don't see the folder that contains our V8 DLLs. And if we don't have our V8 DLLs, then we can't use the less processor. Well, this actually has a very simple fix, and something that's really important for people to understand if you're going to be using web packages. And that is our clearscript.v8, all of these DLLs are not going to be included in the package unless I right-click them and go to Properties and set their build action to Content. So for each one of these, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select their build action to Content under Properties. Then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S. It's very important that I hit Control-Shift-S because that'll actually save the project file. The only other way to save the project file would be close down Visual Studio and hit save when it asks you. But when you make changes like what I just did, it's not going to automatically save the project file. You have to hit Control-Shift-S. But now that we've done that, let's go ahead and rerun our build. So let's come up here, hit enter, And again, this is the cool thing. So you guys get to see why we're doing this in the first place. And of course it failed because, well, not, you know, if things worked, I don't know. What? Error code, insufficient access to site folder. Okay, this ASP.NET folder is being problematic. Let's go ahead and set its security to include deploy. So I'm going to hit edit, add deploy. We should only have to do this once though, fortunately. Come back here and run this again. But yeah, this is the point, guys. We now have a tool that we can just run in a command line every time we make a change, and then it'll just magically have it appear on our production server. And as you see, ClearScript V8 is now being included. So if I hit refresh, things should work. Or not. You know, that's cool too. I wonder if these guys are being blocked. Sometimes that happens. I wonder if these guys have the proper security settings. They should be accessible from iUser. This user right here, this user should have read access to these, otherwise it won't know or won't be able to load it up. And iUser does have access to all these files. So let's think about what this could be. You know, that I'm thinking about it, it's possible that we don't have the C++ Redist package. Remember how like anything compiled with like Visual Studio or Visual C++ 2012, for example, in order to have it run on a target machine, we have to install a Redist package. So let's go ahead and install that. This is just a really common thing that could happen. This is a common thing that could happen with a new installation of a server or a client. So I'm going to download Visual C. Well, it's not how you spell Visual. Visual C++ Redist VS 2012. And I'm going to hit download, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the 64-bit version here. Go ahead and install this. Hopefully it's not going to tell me it's already installed, because that just wouldn't be any fun. Alright, it's saying processing, initializing. I don't understand why things can't be either statically linked or packaged or something. It's just so annoying that you have to install this all the time. Still getting an error. Let's also, for good measure, let's grab the whoops, wrong one. For good measure, let's grab the 32-bit version too. Which is going to be your x86. Now I'm pretty sure this is the version of C++ that it was compiled. With 2012. At least I hope so. Otherwise this is going to be a bunch of fun time installing these Redist packages. Yeah, I'm just leaving it on video installing these Redist packages because inevitably we're going to have something somewhere at some point that's going to require them. So we might as well just install them, even if it doesn't fix our problem. It's a good idea to have them installed. After it does this, also for good measure, I'm going to restart my website. So we've done that. Now I'm going to come back to IIS Manager. I'm going to hit restart. Wait a year and a half. Come back here, hit refresh, and hopefully we won't get the same error. ClearScript 32, ClearScript 64, V8, IA32. Oh, there we go. It works. So it was the Redist packages. Okay. Now our code, or our site works, but when we hit login, huh? Well, that's weird. I wonder what database it thinks it's connecting to. Oh, derp. It didn't even... Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we say unable to connect to any of the specified MySQL hosts. So let's go ahead and fix that. That's really the last dependency that our application has. Once we have that done, we will be pretty much good to go, and we'll be able to do all of our deployments and build our CI tool, and, well, the auto updater will be then almost done, except the actual launcher portion. So let's go ahead and get MySQL running. I'm going to just type in MySQL. It downloads. This should only take a moment. Grab the MySQL community server. Scroll down to the general availability. Let's grab 5.6. Let's just grab the MySQL installer. We're going to grab the... What is the difference? They're both MSIs. I think this one might include everything, and this one does include everything. So I'm just going to hit download. And then no, just start my download. I can't even count how many times I've clicked no, just start my download. I don't think I've ever signed up for MySQL before their website. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get the MySQL installer. And yes, I am installing an installer because, you know, it's Oracle. And Oracle wouldn't have it any other way. But once I download or install the installer, I'll be able to install MySQL, and that'll be good. But also I'll be able to install MySQL Workbench. So I'm going to say install MySQL products. I'm going to accept the licensing agreement that I've never read. I'm going to have it do that. Let's go ahead and do let's do a custom install. Hit next. I'm going to grab MySQL Server. I'm going to grab the server, the client programs, the debug binaries. Why not? As far as applications, I'm going to make sure that MySQL Workbench is selected. And I guess Notifier too. I could care less though. Microsoft for Excel and Visual Studio is irrelevant because we have neither of those things installed. Connectors, we don't actually need to install any of these connectors. And the reason is I like bundling my MySQL connectors with the actual project. I don't like having them installed system-wide. And by unchecking this, it'll ensure that if our code still works, that we properly set it up to be a copy local instance. And for our documentation, I could care less about documentation. And I also have 64-bit selected. So I think that's all good. We don't have the C++ 2010 Redist package, but that's okay. It'll be installed for us. Oh, I love this. This is just one of my favorite things. You guys see this? It seems to be like a random set of installers for Microsoft around this time period. Also, this includes the ASP.NET MVC like 2 or 3. They have this tiny little EULA. It's like, really, guys? Really? There's like so much white space. I don't even know why Microsoft does stuff like that. Let's go ahead and finish. Hit next. We're going to install the stuff. Just hit execute. Right now it's downloading. We're getting pretty good download speed, which is nice. So we might not have to pause the video while this is going. And I guess we can just, talk about stuff. I mean, right now we're so close to getting this done. We're getting our database installed. I'm going to slightly modify the website so that it'll automatically migrate the database every time we do a deployment. So that means our database schema will be automated, our deployments to our web server will be automated, our deployments of our launcher and our client will be automated, and it's been a lot of work. In reality, though, I mean, you could set up an environment like this maybe with a day or two of work. Obviously, it's taken a lot longer to put this in video form, but this kind of environment isn't too difficult to set up. There's just a lot of these little edge cases and a lot of little weird things you have to think about. But once you do get it set up, I can't stress enough how important this is. having to manually copy assemblies. If you're ever in a position where you have to manually copy assemblies to anywhere, manually FTP something up, manually go and do something in order to get something to be updated, then you're wasting a bunch of time basically. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit next. On our configuration, I'm going to say development machine. It'll make it so MySQL isn't using a whole lot of RAM, which I don't know how many gigabytes I allocated to this VM. It looks like I only gave it 2 gigs. Enable TCP/IP networking, sure, why not? Don't really care. Hit next. MySQL root password, I'm just going to type in Nelson as my password. That's the best password. Then hit next. We're going to use Windows service name MySQL 5.6 and run service as a standard system account. Hit next, and it's being configured. Then hit next, and then hit finish. And now what we're going to get is we're going to get our MySQL workbench with local instance already pre-configured. So we click on local instance. My password is Nelson, so I just type that in there. Then I really like clicking this little expand button here so the management tabs aren't interfering with my schema tab. Then what I want to do is I want to right click schema tab and hit create schema, and I'm going to call this Buzz, or just Buzz MMO, sure, why not? Correlation, I'm going to set that to UTF Unicode CI, right there. Then hit apply, and then hit apply, and then hit default, or whatever, and now we have a Buzz MMO schema. So now we have all the information we need in order to set up our awesome little connection string in our production parameters. So let's jump back into Visual Studio. Let's jump into the config folder of our Buzz MMO web. Let's open up our production config. Let's configure it. Server will still be localhost. Database will be Buzz MMO. UID will be root. Password will be Nelson. And we want to allow user variables. But before we deploy this, we need to make sure that all of our database schema is going to be migrated on the first time that our application starts. So let's look at the code required to get Entity Framework to auto-migrate our database. It's actually pretty straightforward. In order to do that, we need to jump into our buzzmmo.data project and open up our MMO database context. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up an initializer. Actually, I'm not, we're going to say database dot set initializer. And the initializer will be a custom initializer that's called when the given DB context type is used to access a database for the first time. So yeah, right now what it's going to do is it's going to create the database if it doesn't exist. But what we want it to do is we want it to create the database and also do additional migrations if the database is out of date. So we're going to say database set initializer, and I'm going to say new migrate database to latest version. And then I'm going to pass in the MMO database context as the first generic argument. And then I'm going to pass in configuration as the second. Now this configuration class comes from our buzzmmo data.migrations namespace. And then it requires a connection string name. So the connection string name I'm going to pass in is MMO database. So now whenever my web application will start, it'll ensure that the database is at the latest version. We'll test that here momentarily, but for now, let's go ahead and hit F6. It doesn't even matter if we hit F6, honestly. Because all we need to do, remember, all we need to do is find our thing over here, come over here, hit up, hit enter. And we get 4 warnings, skipping backups, blah, 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 reference, blah, 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 don't care. What we do see, however, is that it updated 10 files. It didn't do a full update, which is really nice. It does delta updates on that. Let's come back here to our page, and let's go ahead and just hit refresh. By hitting refresh, we are the application is now restarted because files underneath the bin directory changed, so IIS will automatically restart the app. When we hit it for the first time, it'll be loaded into memory. When it's loaded into memory, it should run the migrations. Actually, I'm not sure. It might run the migrations after I try to log in, but let's see what happens. I'm going to say, yeah, it hasn't ran the migrations yet. Now let's try logging in with admin and hit enter. Now it should run the migrations. And the reason being is that this is the first time we're actually accessing the database, as opposed to previously when we loaded the page, we weren't hitting the database, so the database initializer wasn't invoked. And look at that. So let's come back here. Let's refresh, and now we see that we've migrated. Let's go ahead and change something and see if our migration gets updated just by doing a deploy. So I just want to make sure this works before we move on. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to open up client. I'm going to open up something and change something. Let's go to user. Let's change the maximum length of username to 129. This is going to really bug me, but I don't really care right now. After we do that, let's open up our package manager console. And then we're going to make sure our startup project is BuzzMMO Web, and then we're going to set our default project to BuzzMMO Data, and then I'm going to say add migration change username length. Hit enter. We should get a new migration that reflects the fact that we just changed the max length of our username. And we do. So let's go ahead and say update database database to ensure that the migration applies locally. Now that's important. We want to make sure that we can apply it locally before we send it to production. And it does apply locally. So now what we're going to do, we're going to come up here, we're going to hit enter. This will perform the build step. Come back here, hit refresh. Nothing really interesting should happen yet. Of course, it's going to take a year and a half. Again, my VM isn't going to be the fastest thing in the world. Even my host is starting to show its age. Nothing bad happens. Let's open up users and say alter table and see that indeed username was bumped up to 129. So if you guys have done web development before, this should be really interesting, because really all I did was come in here, change this from 128 to 129, created a migration, it was all automatic, applied it to my local database, it succeeded, and then I executed the build step and it got deployed to production. Let's go ahead and make sure that we can access this from our host machine. So I'm going to say mmo.3dbuzz.sta. And we indeed do get access on our host machine. So admin, username admin, password admin, disable for domain. Let's go into our admin. We have our users and our roles and our deploy tokens and our settings. Let's go ahead and do a deployment of our launcher. And then I think that'll, our launcher and our client. Now let's bring basically everything together. Now that we have our entire build script written, let's bring everything together and deploy a launcher and deploy a client. So to deploy our launcher, well, first of all, when our file gets uploaded, it gets set to domain. Domain right here on env equals prod equals mmo.3dbuzz.com. What I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to create a new property group here. I'm going to say if env equals sta, then build config equals release, domain equals mmo.3dbuzz.sta, and parameters is parameters.staging.config, and then I'll create that. So I'll say parameters, I'll just copy it from production, parameters.staging.config. And really, that's let's do lowercase sta. That's all you need to do to add a new environment. I mean, we've now added a new environment, and I think that's really cool. But let's go ahead and get our launcher built and deployed and our client built and deployed. So I'm going to come back here to the developer command prompt. Instead of doing a build for our website, I'm going to say msbuild buzz MMO build.proj /t : we're going to say deploy launcher. We're going to say /p : env equals sta, and that should be all we need. Oh, we also need our deploy token. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to create a new deploy token. So I'm going to come up here, hit deploy tokens, create token, and I'm going to type in my local IP address, which is 192.168.1.133. Then I'm going to grab this token, and then I'm going to say /p : deploy token equals, and I'm just going to paste it in here. I'm going to hit enter. And wait a year and a half, maybe even longer. I don't know what it's stuck up on. I really didn't like something. Upload file task, one or more errors occurred. An error occurred while sending the request, unable to connect to the remote server. Connection attempt failed because the connection party did not properly respond after a period of time. Yeah, that's weird. If we try to go API launchers latest, we get a 404. Oh, API v1 launchers latest, which just returns blank for now. That's fine. Upload returns an error. The requested resource does not support GET, which is good. Okay, I'm wondering why it just decided to... Because it's resolving the... I know it's resolving the domain. We don't use env anywhere there. That's interesting. We use env once there. We don't use env at all there. So the fact that I added a new environment should not have affected anything. I'm just going to take this whole thing, copy it, hit Control ET, and then see what happened. The upload file task failed unexpectedly. Oh, it's connecting over SSL. Yeah, see, I'm doing HTTPS right there, not HTTP. Yeah, let's just not deal with that right now. I'm just going to change that to HTTP. Derp. Unauthorized. Why are you unauthorized? Did I disable non-secure connections? Maybe? No, I don't do that. Okay, so we have one of two cases, either deploy token header is not present or invalid deploy token. It could be the IP address that we are... I'm just going to generate another deploy token. IP address should be 192.168.1. Oh, maybe it's not. Right, the IP address is going to be something different because I'm using a virtual machine. Let me go ahead and look at my my virtual network editor. So it should be on VM8. I actually don't know what the host is going to be. The host, because if I ping 192.168.1.133, I do get a reply, but there should also be a .1, and there is a .2. So there's a .1 and a .2. One of those might be the IP address that our host is hitting our client with. So I'm gonna create a deploy token for 2.1. This would be a whole lot easier if this wasn't all local stuff. It's a lot easier to know the IP address of something when you talk in public terms of public IPs and not private IPs. Okay, we got a internal server error. Well, that's new. I actually know why we're getting an internal server error. It's working. I bet we're getting an internal server error because we do not have a permissions set up for our upload folder. So let's go ahead and create our uploads folder. File, new folder, uploads. And then I'm going to right click, hit properties, go to security, and I'm going to edit this so that iUser has full control over this folder, so that the iUser can actually save into this folder. And we get a launcher that has finally been deployed. So if we come back over here, we hit return to home, we see download launcher version 1. If we hit download, we do indeed get that zip. Now let's try to deploy our client. It's basically going to be the exact same thing, except for instead of deploy launcher, we're going to type in deploy client. And it's going to take a second also, because we have to invoke Unity to perform the actual build. And there we go. If we check our database, if we check our uploads folder, we see we have 2 and 3. And if we check our database, we should have those 2 entries added inside of our uploads. And indeed we do. Really, there's not a whole lot left to talk about. The only thing that we have to do now is tell our build script to skip the uploads folder so that our build script does not delete all the uploads every time we do a build. Because watch this, if I try to do a build right now, of our website, notice how our uploads folder disappears. Now, obviously, that's not optimal because we just deleted all the clients and launchers we just uploaded. So let's go ahead and fix that real fast. I'm going to come up here to our build script, and then I'm going to scroll down to my deploy website, and I'm just going to change it so that we skip that file. And it's going to be the exact same syntax that we saw right here. So before I say set params file, I'm going to say skip :directory equals / uploads money. Now let's come back into here and let's recreate that uploads folder. Of course, it's very important that when we recreate the uploads folder, we're going to want to right click it, hit properties, go to security, hit edit, go to iUser, hit full control, hit apply, hit OK, so that we can now do that. In addition, I'm going to go ahead and upload another launcher. I'm going to upload a launcher because the client takes a second to build. Okay, our launcher did indeed get uploaded. We can verify that right now. Now let's go ahead and update our site again. So I'm going to hit enter. And we updated the site, but notice how we did 4 updates, but we didn't do any deletions because we skipped the uploads folder. That's exactly the behavior we're looking for. Okay. So that pretty much completes our build script. It's a 94-line long file that took, what, 4, 5, 6 videos to put together? But the point is that now our entire build process is automated. All we have to do now is put together a CI tool that will be responsible for invoking these particular tasks. So I think that pretty much wraps this video up, and we'll see you guys in the next one.